Greetings. It is the 4th of April, 2024. Delighted to have you with us for Content Evolution New World. Mike, delighted to see you and glad to have everyone here. Our topic is that we're going to unpack revolves around the news that you probably read about, where Incognito Mode, which, by the way, is not a Google exclusive. All right, there are some other companies, but Google was the company that was featured saying, maybe not as incognito as you thought. We're going to talk about the ramifications of this. Mike, I think you're living in the neighborhood where Netscape was born.
Right.
In fact, I know some people who went to go work for Netscape, and I'm trying to remember back, but maybe you remember more clearly. Was there ever a great expectation of privacy in search, or has it always been fraught with, yeah, you ask us a question and we're going to keep tabs on what people are asking? What do you think? I don't know.
I think there were quote disclosures in the T's and C's, but if we don't think anybody reads them now, I'm not sure we were any better back in the 90s, late 90s, than we are now. I think what people were unaware of, and I don't think vendors particularly helped, it was more outside entities, right? It was, the EFF and others at the time, because the consumer protection groups, were woefully understaffed and couldn't, make any kind of headway in terms of monitoring because nobody really understood the technology the way and I think people, we were all to some degree kind of the frogs in the water in the pot, right? It wasn't until we learned or was disclosed to us how they were gathering data and how not just Google but others were able to piece together very interesting profiles of consumers based simply on what they were searching for. And later, as eBay and others came online, and started allowing people to buy stuff and then buy or mediate fairly important things like medical information, insurance, banking, then I think consumers started to get a little bit more aware of it. I don't think he gets a lot of, it is his quote, right? Scott McNeely, right, is, privacy, get over it. You don't have any more privacy anymore. But I don't think there was the larger understanding from consumers how exactly. I think it really shifted for consumers when that day, the internet and search started showing up on their mobile phones.
Yeah, I think, if I remember back before we, jumped directly into Google and, what they settled on doing, is the most authentic version of this is actually what Nat Goldhaber was doing. Do you remember Nat?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And he had this thing called Cyber Gold at one point. And he was very explicit that said, I would like to pay for your attention, right? And, there was no subterfuge. He just said, I have things that I want to expose you to that are, sponsored content or whatever. And if you do this, you'll get these cyber coins or whatever it was. That
it was a form of a currency. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And you would end up with an account of these cyber coins and you could buy stuff, right? It was like the old idea of green stamps. I don't know if you guys enough to remember that, but the whole idea was, I'm going to, give you the opportunity to do this. If you opt in, I will compensate you for your time to look at sponsored content. And I thought that was he called it orthogonal advertising, right?
Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
And it was the most authentic version of online, because he was telling you, there was no magic trick, right? He was
Right.
telling you explicitly, I am going to, I'd like your attention and I'm willing to pay for it. All right. All this other stuff that we're doing in end user license agreements and, other things are, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It's the Wizard of Oz. All right. That, we're doing things with your data, but, avert your eyes. All right.
Right.
There's, and I think that the organizations that are likely to do better over time are ones where you can earn your trust. I mean, at the same time, when we set this call, Mike, to this topic,
Mhm.
right? I also bring to your attention, look, all right,
Yeah.
AT&T, oops, your all of your private information, your social security numbers on the dark web now. Oops, all right, and so I don't want to single, Google out. They are amongst a number of actors that clearly don't understand how to keep your information secure in a interesting way. But I think that the issue was that they made a promise, right?
Correct.
That they said, if you use this modality, incognito mode, um, you're safe, and we're not saving that information, and they were. All right. Now they weren't saving it tied to, like we were going to get pop-up ads, but they were using it to train things. They were using it for
Oh,
other reasons, right? Uh,
it was, I would argue, as we all know, I'm no lawyer, but I did pay attention to this when I was an analyst for a while. It was not a primary area, but an area of some focus for me. It was really, we used the currency earlier. They used that phrase when you and I started to talk about this or first brought it up, which is it was primarily probably, focused on, what would amount to internal Google currency, right? We've acquired this information, and we can augment profiles, and as you say, train things, understand location travel, which I think is probably, it was, yeah, we have to go. I didn't go through and read all the pleadings on the the settlement of this. But I think what gets most people concerned, I think a lot of consumers, is it's the location data, the location histories, right? That
yeah.
can really be very revealing. And I think to your point, I mean, it's like, hey, you said you weren't going to do this, and yet you were doing this. And I find it interesting because I don't know if you saw in there is that part of the settlement is Google has agreed to block third-party cookies for 5 years or something like that. I was like, wait a minute, you guys were already deprecating third-party cookies. The end of last year was supposed to be when they were starting to initiate that, preventing third-party cookies from websites to land on to get stuck onto your browser and then start collecting the data. So I found that interesting. It's a little off-putting when their spokesman basically says, "Oh, that was just old technical data. We're very happy to get rid of that now, so we'll do that." Which, I think the other thing to note there in this discussion is, okay, they admitted they were doing that. I'm sure that the settlement was pretty specific. Oh, we admitted no real wrongdoing, et cetera, but they did pay off stuff to make it happen. But this is all part of a big sweep by Google to get rid of as many of these lawsuits that have been on the books, in preparation for what they and a lot of us believe is going to be a very large justice. It's already not the Justice Department, the antitrust work that the Justice Department's kind of initiated on search and Google advertising. So I think that was the other element that I think you and I, we didn't note or we didn't talk about previously was they've settled like 4 or 5 of these suits in the last 6 months to a year.
I mean, yeah, I'll make two observations, then we'll go into kind of like, we'll ask some other people to join us. All of you who, the faithful, are here. When the similar function is available on Firefox,
Yep.
I, kind of find, given what I know about Firefox as an organization, is I think that probably functions the way that I expect it to function, right? Where
Right.
I never did try to, invoke that function from Google because I said, yeah, well, okay. Because I also know something about that organization, and, you know, uh, they like to extract, value out of it, whether it's explicitly tied to their advertising
Right.
model or not. They like the behavioral stuff, right? They like the, how you're operating as a population. They find,
Right.
value in that, and we know that that's true. The second, so that's a brand, where how far do you extend? I think Google is a very innovative organization in a lot of ways, but it also has an accretion of certain kind of engineering bureaucracy that uh, gives it a patina of where its boundaries are. The second is that search has been around a lot longer than the new, generative AI and large language model stuff, right?
Right.
And so we're leaning into where the data training sets, right? And I think that, Google probably said, oh, well, we've extracted all the value we can out of this. We can get rid of it because it's old technical data. Well, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
Old technical data, once you have the patterns out of it, you don't need the raw material, right?
Right.
Because you've done what you needed to do with it.
Well, no, and you have to continually update, right? As new
Mhm.
people come onto the internet, new generations. It's like, okay, well, we know what we know about boomers and Gen Xers now, and their patterns. And well, we all know that their half-life is, their shelf life's pretty short relative to everybody else. So it's again, I think to your point, you talk about that, the accretion over time,
Mm.
it's nice that they put that in place, that they're going to deprecate third-party cookies, et cetera, and stop allowing those. But I think as I said, I think what they've been gaining through Android, and let's face it, what I found interesting is that was what it even kind of surprised me, Kevin, when we got these revelations from the suit that said, oh, they've been collecting this private user data all the time anyhow, and now they've admitted they were, or acknowledged, or in the suit settled that allegation. They were always very up. What surprised me was the difference between that and Google Mail. I mean, they were very upfront saying, "Hey, we're going to track your mail," not looking at the
I know.
contents of the thing, but just say, "We're going to throw ads in there based
I
on what
know.
we know."
Yeah.
And I was
And
like, nobody. I don't think Google Mail email has suffered from that, from their candor on that topic. So that's what was kind of surprising to me. Is like, well, Google Mail was like, they're very upfront about how they were monetizing that. Yet, it was interesting. That's why I was a little surprised when these allegations were made.
I always get, tickled by the way it misinterprets who I am, right? You know, it thinks kind of like the old Warner Brothers cartoons. They think I'm Elmer J. Fudd, right? Millionaire. I own a mansion and a yacht. Okay, it's like no, that's not me. All right, you have more expectations about what I might be willing to buy than you think. All right, so with that said, let's open up to others who are with us. Anybody want to jump into the conversation? I'm I'm going to call on somebody then. Bruce, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I think that what has gone on at Google is in part reflective of what goes on in so many different industries across the world, including governments. They get away with what they can get away with. And I think that from my perspective, what it comes down to is a lack of integrity, a lack of the ability or the willingness to live up to what you say you'll do. And although that's important, the fact that it violates the privacy of individuals sort of takes it over the edge for me. In fact, quite some time ago, I switched from Google over to Brave, with which I'm quite happy. I mean, it just seems to be a a good search engine. So yeah, I just looked at that and thought, no, I don't want to play in that sandbox.
Well, just wait. Okay. I know what Brave promises too. All right. 5 years from now, the press release,
Yeah, yeah, that, yeah,
I mean, uh, the arena that we're in is the data that is flowing through the system is really valuable. All right. Let's just go ahead
absolutely.
and admit that, and then move on to, what are the rational promises that you can make as a brand or an organization that are sustainable, that would allow
Correct.
you to maintain trust. Rick, that we're arcing over into your world. Does that make sense? All right. I think that's the preventative, right? Forethought that would allow you to be in, good shape, as opposed to being in apology mode.
But also I think there's a whole sector like the DuckDuckGo browser, for example. They've spent millions on marketing, based on simply being a more private version of Google, right? I'm not familiar with Brave. I'm going to definitely look into that. And then I think I think as the growth of generative AI continues, this discussion of search, privacy is going to become increasingly archaic in terms of the amount of information that people are typing into a prompt. What they're putting into a prompt is a Google search times 100. I find myself sometimes when I'm working with AI, just making sure that I remind myself that perhaps somebody could see this beside me and a machine, right? What that would mean. But the amount of data being put into prompts on a daily basis is got to be just tremendous and much more rich and in depth than a Google search, I would think.
Kyle, you're nodding your head. Jump in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have just gone to the dark and cynical place that I just assume all of our privacy and security has long since been given away, and the fact that they're admitting that they've kept incognito data, like, yeah, okay, I assumed that was the case. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of in a dark place on it. But I think what you said is really important. If I think about my interactions with ChatGPT, it's not a prompt and response, right? These are full-on conversations with massive documents being generated, and like the depth of data that's there is tremendous. Here's one of the things that I think is kind of an interesting thought experiment. If we're moving into a world of infinite content generation, is anyone going to be really looking at your shit anyway? Well, on whole, and then does it really, like, do things like copyright even really matter anymore if everyone's going to have the ability to do truly personalized media generation in real time, from the larger corpus, right? If we just assume that everything that's ever been produced gets contributed to the corpus, and we all get to benefit from that, are these issues 20th century issues that are not that big a deal? I think short term they're a big deal, but I feel like on the 5 to 10 year time horizon, it feels like less of an issue.
So Mike, I was going to say, Mike is familiar with this, and I'd ask you to comment, is this notion of angle of repose, right? That when you're stacking up dirt or sand or something, that, the angle where it stops going down is the angle of repose, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, infinite content, Kyle, but there is not infinite human attention. Right, because there's only so many hours in the day, and so on. So the machines can be churning out all kinds of stuff, and the question from an economic point of view is, if I could capture more and more of your attention, what is the angle of repose? What is the moment at which you stop being a valuable person to the algorithm, because now I don't even have any time to make any money because you've captured all of my attention, right? I am now becoming increasingly worthless, okay, after a certain point of capturing my attention. Now you're degrading my value because I can't buy anything, right? Or I can't add any value to it. So I think that the people who are in this game need to understand that you can degrade your audience to the point where they're not valuable anymore, right? You're advertising to people who have no capacity to earn a living. So I just throw that out for.
Well, and I think the other risk, is, to Bruce's point, and this is, I've been waiting for this for 25 years, Bruce, is enough of the market just going, hey, these other search engines, okay, maybe they're local, real time, near me now search stuff isn't as good as Google's. But in the end, the risk to Google is just enough people like Bruce decide, you know what, these other browsers or search engines they're close enough. It's okay, Perplexity is fascinating for complex searches. It really does suck. It won't do it if you ask it for something near you now, any kind of location thing. And I think there's, and Tim Wu's written about this. He's been posting, articles in I think the New York Times and occasionally even the Wall Street Journal. And he's an interesting guy. He's followed Google for a long time. I think he's at Columbia University at the law school. And he's he kind of popularized that phrase, the tyranny of convenience, right? Which is so many consumers are so used to this really cool capability that Google's delivered. They're kind of insulated. And to your point, what is it that drives them to say, Google, either stop this or I'm going, or just what we know most consumers will do, right? Which is they're not going to write angry letters to Suchai or anybody at Google or their congressperson or else. They're just going to go somewhere else, right? They'll go use another platform. And I think that's probably got to be Google's fear, especially and their biggest concern were those two issues, the suits that are the two topics that are part of the antitrust suit, right? Which are the advertising and search. And, I think, the bigger concern, to Kyle's point, isn't that we're all just indifferent to it, but it's like, we'll realize at some point or say, you know what, that convenience just not worth the potential risk. But I think what's interesting, Kyle, what we're saying is, our concerns about Google, your experience with the technology, and you're pretty cynical. Plus, you were right there at the early days of the advertising world, meaning the online search world, and saw what happened there. That I think that the challenge there is not so much for Google to figure out how to be, less evil, but being less, simply setting expectations, as we were talking earlier, Kyle, before you joined. Google was really upfront about Google Mail, right? It's like, hey, we're going to track your stuff and we're going to throw ads in there. We're also not going to charge you for the application of the service.
Yeah.
And nobody seemed to have a problem with that.
Yeah. No. Mike, just pay attention.
But they didn't violate their promises.
You said, oh, don't just, go to, Google, be less evil. Their original brand promise was don't be evil, right? And so now, you're at the arc of having to come back to say, well, don't be as evil as you actually. Again, you've got to be careful when you frame your,
your branding
promises that you're going to be able to deliver, right? Because if you're inauthentic, it's really hard to get things back when you say one thing and do something else, right? Pull it back a little bit, guys. That was.
I don't think it matters. I think it's irrelevant. Really? I don't think it matters because here's why.
Okay.
It's kind of like, here's when it would matter. If there was a data breach and every single American lost $100 out of their checking account because Google, their data got leaked. And so if it affects them in a very real, immediate term, just that they could do something with my data in the future. Well, they've already done it, right? If the product's free, you're the product, right? We've heard that forever. I think that's kind of a thing. Here's what I think is a much bigger threat to Google. Search sucks in comparison to using a large language model, right?
Yeah.
Like you ask it a question, it gives you an answer and you're done, as opposed to you give Google a search and it gives you 40 pages of SEO injected crap. The user experience, I think, is their biggest risk, not the security thing.
Oh, you know what? That's well said, Kyle, because you're absolutely correct. Is they've polluted that experience
so much.
There, because
you
guys, I used to have to read those magazines.
Well, because that's you're back to, as a search engine, my promise was I'm going to give you results, all right, that are good and useful, all right, and it become crappy and irrelevant. Okay,
yep, exactly.
By the way,
you could. I think
the leader, the
right.
leader for that functionality was Bing. Okay,
Yeah. Bing
was so SEO driven, right, that people just kind of say, I'm not getting what I want. I'm getting ads as results. All right. Oops. This is, I told the guys in Boulder that were the development lab. I said, you really need to tweak this so it feels a little bit more useful, guys. All right. Go ahead.
But I think, the thing, I think it's Cory Doctorow. It's a terror. I won't say it out loud. He's coined a very good term for this whole, what the technology could, and we won't say that out loud, but I think it is a
SH asterisk
NENSH, which I think is probably one of the cleverest neologisms I've heard in the last 10 years. That's really good. And I think, Kyle, I think where it really came, there was I have two theories. One is, was it about 15 or 20 years ago? And you guys, we may have all, followed this at the time. When Larry and Sergey were still running things day to day, there was a big purge. Do you remember the big purge about 15, 20 years ago where they said, managers, we don't need managers.
Don't need those stinking managers.
We got engineers. And but the second one is where you really saw things start to fall apart. And then I think really where Incognito people started really thinking, oh, there's an Incognito mode, was the mobile experience on search, because that's where you really started to see that Cory Doctorow word process happening when you were on mobile, using mobile, a mobile device with search, where an organic result would oftentimes be you'd have to scroll 5 screens to get past the advertising, right, to the actual thing. And then they develop, they were also developing a thing called the answer, which I think, or the, what was the phrase for that box that stopped at the top, which was supposed to be based on, this is what we think the best answer, right? Because that was from their perspective, the product development was, we need to go from sending out a bunch of blue links that may or may not have the information you want to an answer. You can only get that to a certain degree when you're doing search if you have some more information about that person asking the question. Yeah. And so there was that goal of delivering that very cool thing we all wanted, which was just the answer. And somehow that wasn't good enough for them, because then there was this last 3 to 5 years of very bad search experiences for users from Google, which was kind of surprising. Not surprising, but I think that kind of decision they made 20 years ago, and that, and there are a lot of folks who were there at the early days of Google, kind of providing more refined corporate communications and public facing communications. A lot of those folks didn't leave to go somewhere else. They retired. They were, they'd done their 20 years at Google, or 15 years, and did quite well. So I think there's also a generational leadership issue they're going through with right now too. Not just, the fact that, Larry and Sergey stepped aside some time ago, but I think there's a whole level of, if there is some management there, a whole bunch of leaders who are, not as experienced perhaps as some of the earlier folks. And I don't mean to cast aspersions, but on the other hand, who cares what I say? Their actions have landed them in the place they are right now. But I think, Kyle, you're right. I think that this is, how do they hold off more and more of that existential threat, right? Which is, if you guys don't make this a useful experience, that 93% market share you have or whatever it is in search, you're leaving it on the table for others to figure out how to use it. And I think, Perplexity is pretty interesting, but they're never have this, they're going to have a hard time getting to the scale and how they're going to generate revenue.
Yeah.
Google did figure that out pretty well. This is how you make money with search.
Mark, you got any thoughts for us today?
Well, amazingly enough, I do. So what I see in this discussion is this is a very tree-oriented discussion versus forest. In other words, we're focusing on Google in this particular situation, but the real issue is the one that Kevin started earlier, which is truth versus money. It's really there, is truth better? Is transparency better? There's a certain group who think it is. There's a lot of people who don't think it is, who think that generating money and making money and having value and however you do it is more important. And in my book, I call it Lego versus grab. Lego is love, empathy, gratitude, optimism. Grab is greed and racism and abuse and bullying and belligerence. And those are the two sides of us and of human beings. So this is not going to go away until something happens to those two sides, that they balance differently. And typically greed wins, the grab wins. And that's the history, not just of bullying. People see a resource, there's oil in the ground, they want to make money from it. There's data in the world, they want to make money from it. I'm with Scott and I even go further. I say you don't own your own data. There's no reason why something that I can see, the fact that Kevin is wearing glasses, belongs to Kevin. That's data in the world for me. The fact that what color our eyes are, that's data in the world. The whether we have diseases, in fact, is data in the world. It's not, and the fact that we want to keep it private, and there's a drive among some people to want to do that, which is what a lot of our society or our culture is based on. That is a very that is more attached to the greed side than to the Lego side, more attached to the grab side than to the Lego side. So my ultimate thing in the book that I'd love everybody's thoughts on is, I'm saying one of the things that we're going to be able to do in the third millennium, in this new world we're in, is we're going to be able to work on these sides of human nature, because we have the gene editing and we have all this kind of stuff that we could never do before. Do you think we'll ever get rid of some of the grab or have less of it in people so that we can have more of the truth side and it doesn't always become this fight that the truth side typically loses?
Yeah, well, I would just offer this, that there is a potential for a party to enter into the equation that allows individuals to monetize their information, right? And therefore it becomes a both and, all right? It becomes, the individual being able to make a grab on their own identity, right? And that they're going to get help from some larger third party that can be the enforcer, kind of like LifeLock, right? Is for, protecting, is that, okay, here's my identity vault, and I'm going to make sure that everything I do goes through that, and their lawyers and their people are going to be the ones, all right, that gate my presence, all right, to the world, all right? I think that it hasn't happened, all right, at scale yet, but I think it could, because there's money to be had, right? And
but I think
and it's akin to selling your body parts. It's akin to, like, I know people who've sold their eggs or sold their sperm or sold their, you can monetize. How much about your body or can you monetize?
I'm saying there are plasma centers all over the all over the world. So yeah, okay, I got it.
But I think your point, Kevin, the one that I think is, it's too bad Stuart wasn't able to join us today, because I know he's got some experience in this, is identity. right? If I have a secure identity that is, you know, elastic and mobile enough, I can go show it to some business holder in France or Hawaii or wherever on any point in time during a day, and they're like, "Yep, okay, that's you." Then great. I agree with you. I think that notion, and that's something, you know, a former colleague, Andrew Frank, has written about in his advertising research. Is that was years ago, right? He and others were saying, hey, you know, you could probably just get a pretty good representative sample of the, you know, US population at any point in time by gathering, you know, by paying out X percent to the, you know, percentage of a given cohort that you need in your to make a, you know, statistically valid estimate of what a market. And gosh, I mean, how easy is it for us to send money right now to each other? It's easy, right? And if I just had a, you know, got a little notification saying, hey, you know, car manufacturer, insurance company A, B, or C wants to, you know, how much, you know, here's $50. Is that good enough for the latest snapshot of Mike McGuire? It's like, you know,
But what's the
who
incentive
knows?
for you to be true there? For you to be truthful?
Getting the money.
Right, but so you get the money anyway. You just lie. You don't have $1 million. You know, if they're
Oh,
asking
no,
for
no,
you,
no, no. They didn't. Then when I say that, to your point, Mark, it's not them relying on my word. They would literally, if this is my, you know, secure digital identity and I give them permission, they literally, theoretically, right, would not just be working on my word. They'd be able to see bank statements, you know, balances, insurance payments, travel,
okay, I hear
etc.
you.
And it's again, but that's relied, you know, almost, I think, wholly on the ability to say, this is in fact the digital representation of Mike McGuire, Mark Bretsky, you know, Kyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
There's the other oppositional force here is, you know, proprietary versus, you know, generosity, right? Which is, you know, do you get more if you're sharing than you're getting by, you know, holding things close, right?
Right.
We know that large organizations have the ability, you know, I mean, there's a reason the government has SCIFs, right? Oh, this is information we don't want anybody else to have, so we're not even going to connect to anything, right? It's going to be inside this, you know, Faraday cage, right? And, you know, it's, you know, only a handful of people get to know whatever it is, right? So it's not even digital, it's in a 3-ring binder, all right? So I look at that and I know people who are basically saying, you know what, copyright and patents and all that kind of stuff, you know, we should toss that stuff because those are inhibitors to generally sharing human knowledge and advancing faster, right? And that's more important, right? Well, I can understand that. I can hold, you know, 2 opposing thoughts in my head simultaneously, and they are, you know, it's interesting, right?
It's, I think what we're not saying, Kevin, out loud is to Carl's
Say it
point
out loud,
earlier
Mike.
about is it's not that a rights holder is concerned about you looking at that art or listening to it. They're concerned about, are you going to take that and try to monetize it yourself or exploit it for your commercial gain? And I think that's where, you know, that's you know, a real issue that the copyright does have to deal with, and rights holders have to find out is, do they need to get compensated for every training set that's been used on, you know, written words, music, etc.? I don't know. I mean, honestly, if that was a payment that had to be made, I would say that their record labels and music publishers should pay that, not the artists themselves. Point being, if you're going to make those a very open space, again, I don't disagree, as long as individuals can't take another person's work and monetize it without their consent. I think honestly, that's what's bothering.
unless the entire model shifts to compensating on the creation, not on the use.
Well, that's exactly, yeah.
Right. That because then I think it could make sense to pay per generate. You have official models. This is the Nicki Minaj model, and anytime I use that, I pay her. And how it's used is irrelevant. Right.
Exactly.
Now that's good. Like the death throes of that economy are going to be intense, right? It's probably going to take 10 or 20 years for that to shake out, but like that feels like where it's going to me.
Well, and I think you probably tapped into, Kyle nailed why, and folks like Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, I don't know if the Stones have yet, Neil Young have all done what? Here you go.
Yeah.
Sell it to the highest bidder. I'll
Yep.
keep making stuff out here, and I've got my audience, and I'll
Yeah.
keep playing shows and whatever. But
and
here you go.
value of live shows probably goes up, but it's like, yeah, just get your money for the for the input side in any way you can,
And
the output side.
you know, and Neil and Bob learned before anybody else's. And oh, by the way, even going forward, don't give up your publishing rights.
Well,
right?
I mean,
and your masters. Don't ever give up your masters,
well,
whatever you do.
You do a Taylor Swift, and you basically say, here, you know, you can have all my previous recordings, and now I'm going to re-record them. Okay. And I'm a better singer than I was when I first, you know, put those down. So please, you know, go ahead. My fans will buy the new stuff.
I'm sure Neil and Bob can make that argument.
I didn't say that.
Being a better singer now than they were at 20.
But Kyle would tell you that they, you know, go back and sample it and have an authentic, right, you know, version that's synthetic of who they were, right? Isn't that what's happening with the what's the name of that group from Scandinavia? ABBA. Didn't ABBA appear on stage as, you know,
as holograms,
synthetic versions of themselves on stage?
They're doing a new version of it too.
Yeah. The point is that, you know, they said, well, you know, we're old now, right? Well, let's go sample the young versions and we'll put them on stage, right? And
well, I agree. I mean, I think the one thing
let's
about
put
Google,
it on with our guest, you know, Hatsune Miku, okay, who's a Vocaloid from Japan, right? And she doesn't actually exist at all, right? She's a cartoon, right? But she's pretty good.
Well, I think the other thing with Google, I think one of the things, Kevin, we were talking about, Kyle, where just, you know, they're settling all these lawsuits right before they have to roll into the Justice Department antitrust stuff.
Right.
And I think I think a friend of mine, Andrew, had mentioned this too as a possibility, is like, you know, they could probably just spin off YouTube back out as a third party, you know, as its own company, right? Because that's a gold mine. I mean, I think they're printing money over it at YouTube. And more importantly, to this notion of the sharing of lots of knowledge, art, etc. You guys probably know this, but I mean, you can go in there now and search Jimi Hendrix, Dick Cavett show, and you could sit there and watch that and go, that interview, and go, wow, Dick Cavett's really a lot better than any of the late night hosts that we have right now. Those interviews are fascinating. And Google actually, I think, has that opportunity. If they spin that off, it can still make money, but have that preservation. I think, Kyle, to your point, I can still go see Neil Young when he was 23 years old, you know, on YouTube, and it's good. Yeah, it's a little too, you know, it's a lot of nostalgia, and then you see him now, it's like, okay, same guy, older, good song. Okay, next.
But it won't be like, I think it goes to, I don't know if you saw, there's a, I can put it in the chat if I can go find it. I saw a thing yesterday. Someone did a Beatles song where the lyrics of the song is, you know, I'm not Paul McCartney, I'm an AI, you know, I'm not John Lennon, I'm an AI. And so it's using, you know, like Midjourney created images of the Beatles with their sampled voices, you know, sort of calling it out. I think what we're going to see is not only nostalgic work, but I think we'll see 23-year-old Neil Young writing and performing songs, right? Like, so I don't think it's just a static, you know, backward looking thing that it's only good for nostalgia. I think we'll see artists, you know, proceed forward.
Oh, as you were saying that, Kyle, it was interesting. I thought of this. I found another interview that it's another Dick Cavett, where he was getting. What was fascinating is it was, if you guys know Oscar Peterson, right? Yeah. The piano player, just brilliant. This interview was fascinating because it wasn't like, well, who is your favorite trumpet player to play with? It was literally, they were going into theory. It was like, well, what's Hampton style versus yours versus so-and-so, and what he do, and he could voice, and it was like, I was sitting there going, that is old, but that's still current and useful information to people who want to play piano or understand music. Mm-hmm. And I think, to your point, being able to project that not just as this artifact, right, to be able to, that Kyle, it's another idea I have for a business. It's music instruction. Let's go take Oscar Peterson from 1968 or 70 on Dick Cavett and move it and update it. How would Oscar Peterson be playing so-and-so? Would, how would Oscar, those sorts of things start expanding in our notions of knowledge and sharing and entertainment that I think get very cool.
But I think that the GPTs, the CE GPTs we just made are a version of this, where historically what we would have done is written a book. Here's this artifact of my thinking at this point in time, as opposed to now we've got this thing that people can interact with and it can generate things moving forward. And as they get more sophisticated, and Rick, to your concern about what if they say shitty stuff, well, as they get more sophisticated and hallucinate less and we have a bit more control over them, we might start to trust them more and more to actually generate new thinking for us. And then even if we're not there, it can be out there generating new thinking.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, that, I was thinking, Kyle, is we haven't seen this or heard this from any of those folks, right? The vendors or technology developers. But I think, Google is going to go through its time of paid. Apple's going through it now. I think we're going to see both, unlike, what we saw in previous of these kind of cases, these antitrust, is the breakup actually isn't going to be that hard for either one of them. Right. Because I think, Kevin and I were talking about this, like by the time Apple wends its way through the case, they're going to be looking at their product set and go, yeah, oh, you know what? We don't do that anymore. We've got another thing going on over here. So you're right. And it's kind of, Google's doing a similar thing without, really addressing what were some of those fundamental concerns. And I think, to your point, Google, I don't know that they're saying, everybody's privacy doesn't matter to us. But I think, I feel that way about the Apple suit similarly, is like, okay, that's good, but is that really the biggest problem that these entities present right now? Yeah. The Apple one, I think in particular, is kind of like, the more you read through that suit, it's like, it's not that, okay, that's bad behavior, I guess. But it's not what I think, the real core issue might be. Right. But I think with identity, I think just to swing the conversation back there, Kevin, I think that's where the interesting development would be is, do we ever come up with a standard to say this is a certified identity for Bruce, for Mike, for Cindy, et cetera? I'm just wondering who that's going to be and who any of us are going to trust to do that. Because we've seen OAuth try that, they've done that with the OAuth standard as far as a baseline for email and kind of identifying an individual across different accounts. But it's something built into these systems. I just haven't seen anything like what we might want for a digital identity like this going forward. Again, maybe we can get Stuart to talk to us about that at some point in the future.
I can tell you that every person who comes to Content Evolution NuWorld regularly, they're all certifiable.
Correct.
I've already been certified.
Yeah. You came in certified, Kyle.
Yeah, you bet. 100%. So,
but Kyle, I think we're talking about some, how we, as things move forward, this notion of, I think particularly for old folks like me, is like what we considered passive entertainment, what we all thought was entertainment and is entertainment to some degree, is kind of passive. And I think what Kyle's describing is a much more active, participatory kind of experience that, is probably going to look real foreign to, at least to me and a lot of others, I think. And that's normal, I think, as we age.
But I also will tell you that, if you're a student of McLuhan, right, which if you're not, you should be, right? Marshall McLuhan is, in my opinion, mandatory knowledge.
Still holds up.
Based on what's going on, is that he talks about hot and cold media. Mm-hmm. And we're going into a hot zone, right? Television's cool because it's very passive. You just look at, YouTube is passive, right? Other than the selection of what you're going to look at. So, the fact is that radio to some degree was a hot medium compared to television because you had to use your imagination to bring to life what was happening to what was being narrated when there were radio plays, right? That you were infusing into it what the characters looked like or where they were, right? So on and so forth. So you're bringing some of your imagination to the table, versus television is very explicit. Now we're going back into a hot medium where you're having to bring a lot of yourself, right, to the interaction. And I would ask you this. If you believe in that cycle, what is the cool thing that is, I don't mean interesting cool, but I'm saying cool media. After this hot period, what is the next cool, right, thing that's likely to occur, all right? Because there's always a counter cycle. So, what's the counter cycle to this hot period that's emerging? It's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I agree. I think
make
that's
your next billion on anticipating what the cool period media is.
I think it probably will be Faraday cages in the form of tents where you can literally just go in there and like not have any electronic communication whatsoever and read a paper book. No, I mean,
essentially deprivation chamber.
Exactly.
Okay.
Everybody gets their own anechoic chamber, which everybody will be insane in 5 minutes if they do that. So, but I think, that cool, what is the next cool is probably actually a little hot. I mean, we'll have to, we'll put a pin in that, Kevin. We can have that as a periodic
we'll have a different conversation. So we're coming up to the top of the hour. We haven't asked participants in a while, so I want to ask now as we conclude. Do you have topics, authors, subject matter experts that you want to recommend that we invite, to join us? And if you have other people that you think should be listening in, they're welcome. It's interesting. I told the two gentlemen who are working on my house, on my plumbing, right, that interrupt me if you need to, but I'm about to do this recording. They say, "Oh, can we listen to that?" So I took their email. I said, "I'll add you to the distribution." So anyway, let's just spend a moment. Are there topics that you would like to have on future episodes? Rick, let's start with you. Who would you like to first?
I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but I do think that someone who's got an interesting point of view presenting to the team would be a great feature to have. But I don't have anyone off the top of my head.
Who do you think is the most influential Marcom person right now, adjacent to your space? Because I can pick up the phone and call anybody on the planet, and I'm not shy.
I think there are a number, but like a guy like Richard Edelman or someone like that who is tied in with Davos and has the annual survey of things like that is probably at the top of the list. And then I think that there are a number of other senior communications people who have worked either in politics or for the large big tech companies.
Okay. I know Richard and Renee, so I'll pick up the phone. And at one time, I was writing pretty big checks to, the early Edelman company from IBM. So they'll probably take my call. Not for the same reason. Bruce, who do you want to invite? Give me
that's something I've really got to give some thought to, Kevin.
Well, send me
typically, generally speaking, the underlying subject that we discuss here in some form or another is technical. But I think that there are so many other avenues that you could pursue if you wanted to pursue them. I mean, whether it's political, whether it's music, whether it's, what have you, filmmaking, I don't know. But I don't know how far away from this core we would want to wander. So I'm just gonna give that some thought.
Well, I mean, we talk about this being the intersection of people and technology, so it can stray over into more people than technology, but that's kind of the focus, is that intersection. Right. And it just so happens that tech hits the headlines, all right, often enough that it gives us an inspiration for a topic. But I might remind you that we had a very good speaker with Chris Shipley, all right, talking about our book, and that was very people oriented, right? So we've had Gary Bowles talking about the future of work, and although future of work is going to be technology enabled, at the core of that, it's still people. Mark, who would you want to have come to the table that hasn't?
The first thing that came to my mind is the person we talked about earlier, McCracken, right? So that I'd really like to hear what he has to say. And since you classified him as a genius, that makes me even more interested in hearing what he has to say.
Yeah. Well, he has a camp, a future camp coming up in New York, I think at the New School, that you could sign up to. You'd have to fly to get there, but he's probably going to take it on the road. So one of the things that you can do is you can write to Pamela DeCesar, who was carbon copied on the note that I sent to you, who basically runs his stuff, and say, hey, I'd like to go to future camp. All right, so that's one exposure. I probably won't get his attention until the fall when he's kind of through his current cycle, but good suggestion. Smart guy, lots of books out there if you want to read Grant McCracken books. Kyle, what do you think?
Wait, I'm not totally done yet, if I can.
Okay, go ahead. Give me another.
Another person is Genevieve Bell, who I met many years ago.
I know Genevieve too. She's
right. So Genevieve, she'd probably be interesting because she's a really bright thinker. And another person that I thought about that I would like to hear more from is Charles Murray. And Charles Murray is infamous from the bell curve, but he's done some very interesting work, and he's a statistician, and he's got interesting ways to look at things. So I'd love to hear from him here.
I'd second that one.
Does anybody know him?
I've written to him in the past. I've by email. I could.
No, okay, but the point is that we don't have a first level connection. Okay,
no, I don't have.
Let me look into that. That sounds like a name that might bring up a lot of different Charles Murrays around the planet. Where is he located? Do you know?
I'd have to look, but it's Charles
I don't know
Murray,
either.
Statistician.
Okay, statistician. All right, Kyle.
I think something around the future of work, this idea that in the future, we're not going to hire for skills, we're going to hire for aptitude. And then that combined with kind of revenge of the liberal arts majors, I think it might be interesting to get an AI literate, either liberal arts or like a philosophy academic, someone who's thinking about how to talk to humans that's also AI literate, because the Ethan Mullick would be something really interesting to get here. But he just talked about, that having the ability to understand how humans work serves you very well in understanding how large models work. So I would love to have someone that really understands the how humans work part, talk about that, especially if they're AI literate and understand how to apply that stuff.
Well, when you say, let me ask one question, Kyle. When you say how humans work, you mean behavioral, how they ingest information, signal?
Yeah, that if you can, if you're good at getting humans to do things, you're going to be good at getting large language models to do things because they behave very, very similarly. That's
honestly, we should find somebody who's really good at sales of fairly complex. I know.
There's something about like a philosophy degree, historically was monetarily useless. And I think in the future, it's not going to be. I would love to find a way to explore that space.
Yeah. Well, I gotta run. I know. See you, Kyle. Thank you. I know who I'm going to invite. Roy P. from Stanford, who was at an Institute for the Future seminar and it was one seat down from me. And Roy has a PhD in philosophy. And then during his academic career at Stanford, they started to form this new faculty for artificial intelligence. And he joined the AI team from the philosophy department. So he's really—
Oh yeah, I'd heard of him. That's right.
He's really tuned into the space that we're talking about, because his roots are in, people and ideas. And then he went over into this other thing.
Who did we have like last year? Kevin from the Institute of the Future, the young man. He's down in L.A. And we had him. He was talking about his most recent book. Oh boy, I got to go get my Evernote to work this morning.
You've probably forgotten how, Mike.
Yeah, it's like, who was that guy? And the thing is, don't you,
Thank
anybody
you, Rick. Appreciate it.
take off Evernote if you use it, guys.
We'll find it.
Yeah.
But the point is, Robert Cialdini would probably be good, who is the, rules of ethical influence guy out of University of Arizona or Arizona State. I don't know. It's one or the other. I don't want to, cast aspersions. And I'm going to just finish up by saying I am very proud of my local university, North Carolina State, for fielding both a men's and women's basketball into their Final Four tournament. That is pretty cool.
That's
and I don't think anybody saw that coming, right, Kevin? I don't know. I think everybody, because isn't NC State like the little brother to Duke and UNC kind of?
Well, I mean, it's always been a rivalry here. Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm most proud of, though, is that these teams, right, the basketball teams, all right, I can't speak for the other sports, but the basketball teams, these are all really academically talented students. Okay, they didn't get onto these teams just because they can throw a ball around a court, right?
Right.
That they're actually all quite good students at UNC, Duke, and NC State. So I don't like academic programs where the people are there to actually be, professional athletes under the guise of, being at a university. Don't like that at all, right? But kudos to NC State. They are doing a heck of a good job, and I'm rooting for them, right? For the home teams.
Kevin,
by the way, in the previous, I just noticed the statistic is the one where Clark, is it Caitlin Clark? Is that her name?
Caitlin Clark, yeah.
The women's tournaments, the scalper tickets were going for 3 times as much as the men's tickets.
Wow.
Which just shows that we've pivoted in terms of interest, and that's kind of a interesting diversity note that, well, good for.
And they're talking about that and celebrating. The women are celebrating that, but they're still paid less.
I know, but I'm just saying that usually that kind of attention, there's a catch-up point, right? Since they've opened up the ability for the academic
NIL,
stuff that they can do, licensing deals, to use their likeness for things, is they will benefit from that. There's no question that that they're going to get offers for deals.
They're already showing that a lot of the women basketball players are further ahead in that NIL, name, image, likeness, licensing stuff than all of the football teams. And apparently I think to your point though, Mark, if they are starting to fill arena, and they are, the WNBA and especially the women's college, I think we've all heard that meme this last month, right? I've seen a lot of commentary from women's sports writers and others saying, noting that, isn't it nice that the boys also have a basketball tournament this year? It's great, because a lot of audiences are turning into the women's games, especially even in the lower brackets.
Bruce, there's a topic that's sitting at the intersection of what you asked for. Is let's do a talk about name, image, likeness, because that is a people topic, right? But it also is potentially in perpetuity. Name, image, likeness is something that becomes, am I giving that to an agent, okay, to replicate me forever, all right, in some way, shape, or form? So that's a people technology topic.
And I would say, Kevin, if there was ever a set of people who would be incented to figure out a robust global digital identity, it would be the lawyers and marketers for those sports teams and those athletes
Absolutely.
who
There
are
you
like,
go.
oh, okay, yeah, we should do that. And
There's
it would be
probably
good.
some, yeah, I probably need to get some sports agent, sports attorney to join.
Oh,
I don't know any of
there was
those.
a good one that I saw. I'll look up his name. The guy who does the NFL was in another thing that I listened to, and he was a smart guy. I'll
Well, so
remember. I'll
it
find his
means
name.
that these fantasy leagues can become real.
Yeah, Kevin, I want to throw another name into the ring here,
Right.
going back to your original question, and that's Mark Halperin. I don't know if you're familiar with Mark or not, but you know he's very well politically connected.
Journalist.
He's a journalist. That's right, Mark. And he's started something called Two Way, and it's very, very interesting what he's doing. I don't know how many people are joining him on a fundamentally a weekly basis, but he's taking a look at the political structure and trying to look at it from both sides of the aisle and analyzing it with some really, really bright people. I don't know. I mean, I know Mark. I don't know if he would have time to be on this podcast, but he would be a very interesting guy because he's combining a lot of different things that touch a lot of people in a different way.
Write to him.
Okay.
Carbon copy, and we'll reach out.
Okay.
I have an assignment for Mike.
Okay.
This
is going to wrap us up. Go ahead.
This is going to wrap us up. I have come across the fact that Dick Cavett voice, which you referenced before, is almost the same to me as Vince Cerf's. And I would really be interested when if I close my eyes when I'm listening to Vint, I hear Dick Cavett. So because you listen to think about that stuff, Mike, put those together sometime and see what you think.
Okay, I will.
All right, you all. Well, thank you very,
Thanks.
very much. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Kevin,
Thanks for everything you do, folks.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.